Let's expand the conversation now with CNN political analyst and White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour, Laura Barron-Lopez, and CNN political commentator and Republican strategist, Alice Stewart. Alice, under normal circumstances, if you're talking about a candidate that's been indicted twice, a potential third, maybe even a fourth indictment looming, accused of endangering national security by mishandling classified documents, accused of obstruction of justice, that would be a slam dunk, and yet it seems like more Republicans are supporting Donald Trump at this point in the race. Why do so many Republican voters stick with him?
Well, you said under normal circumstances. Normal circumstances, that person would be gone and out of the race, and would do so voluntarily, if not being forced out by others. But the reality is, what Donald Trump says is what his base believes. They are not looking at the facts and the substance of any of these indictments. None of them. They don't care what is in them or the volume of them, or if there comes one every day until the Iowa caucus. They're not concerned about that. They're looking at this more as a weaponization of the DOJ. They say Jack Smith has it out for Donald Trump, and they truly believe that Donald Trump is a victim of the justice system, and that there is a two-tier justice system and is going after Donald Trump. And no matter how any rational person cannot see it that way, that's what they believe, and they're going to continue to stand by him. The problem is there are other people that actually look at the substance of this and look at the concerns of trying to overturn an election, mishandling of classified documents, and the whole litany of indictments. And they're realizing we don't need a nominee for our party that is going to be tied up in the courtroom. We want someone out in the cornfields of Iowa talking about issues that are important to us. And so many people in Iowa tonight and moving forward are looking for that alternative that is going to fight for them and not for their own past grievances.
The concern for those voters is whether what works in the primary will work in the general election, right? One thing that is really stunning, Laura, isn't just Trump's resilience among those voters. It's also his resilience with so many Republican lawmakers, especially on Capitol Hill, whose lives he put at risk by sending his supporters to the Capitol on January 6th. They're sticking with him.
A lot of House Republicans actually are sticking with him. I'd say more of House Republicans than Senate Republicans. But even so, you don't hear a lot of Senate Republicans out there hammering the former president or encouraging other candidates to really break from him. And part of why voters, view these indictments as a weaponization of the government is because the former president continually attacks the justice system that way, but also the other candidates. You've seen Ron DeSantis, you've seen Tim Scott and others question what the Justice Department is doing, and that feeds that among the GOP voters, which still about 6 in 10 Republican voters believe that the 2020 election was stolen, because that's what Republicans are making a lot of this election about.
Right. To Alice's point about a rational person not totally ascribing to the same set of facts, right? So, Alice, if you are strategizing with these other Republican candidates, for example, at tonight's big dinner in Iowa, how are you suggesting to them that they not only take on Trump, but then court his voters who are so dedicated to him?
Look, there are people that are supportive of Trump and they're not going anywhere. There are other Republicans that are not supportive and they're looking for an alternative. They are not going to lose any sleep or not support someone if you directly attack Donald Trump, because they feel the same way. My recommendation, having been on a campaign against Donald Trump, is you have to go right at him, and you have to call a spade a spade. We're going to get that tonight from Chris Christie. I would assume Asa Hutchinson will do the same. I've talked with other campaigns. They're going to focus more on issues that are important to Iowa. Vivek Ramaswamy's team says he's going to focus on the economy. DeSantis looking at the more optimistic vision for the campaign and this country. And Tim Scott, a new visionary outlook for the future. But Republican voters in Iowa, speaking with leaders and evangelical and party leaders, they're looking at the long game. They're not looking at who's the best to win the Iowa caucus. They're looking at who can win the general election. And Iowa has the distinct responsibility, not just to pick the party's nominee, but to winnow the field to who is the best candidate to win in the general election. And that's what many of them are looking for, and hopefully more Republicans as we head into these early states. I'll tell you the person I feel sorry for tonight at this dinner. Each candidate has 10 minutes to speak. I feel sorry for the one who has to turn off the mic on Donald Trump, because he's going to keep on talking.
They're not going to have a good time, I bet. Speaking of Iowa setting the tone and the early tone in a primary season, Laura, Ron DeSantis has now been trying to change the tone of his campaign for at least a couple weeks, talking about a reboot, getting rid of more than a third of his staff. What does he need to do to distinguish himself?
Well, I was just talking to a Republican strategist about this, who says that when DeSantis is going places, his events are very small, and he's not getting that big of a draw to these places compared to Trump, and that he's also surrounded more by Floridians than he is by any of the local state Republicans, which could be a problem for him when he's trying to win voters. Also, I think speaking to what Alice and I have been talking about, which is that he's not going directly at Trump. He will occasionally, sometimes, take a small punch at the former president, and then he steps back. He also waffles on some of his policies. We saw that recently when he said he'd put Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in charge of the CDC, and then a few days later said, never mind, I wouldn't do that. And so it feels as though he still is desperately trying to figure out what exactly he can say that will bring Trump voters to his side, because no matter what, there are a set of Republican voters that Alice is talking about that certainly want a totally different nominee. But in order to win the primary states, you have to get a big chunk of those Trump voters. And we see that DeSantis is trying to figure out the way to do that and not doing it very well.
And tonight's dinner will be a unique opportunity because Donald Trump doesn't normally like to share the stage or the room with other candidates, and he's doing so tonight. So any of these chances these candidates may take to punch Donald Trump, they're going to get booed. And that will be a headline tomorrow if they do that. So that'll be a difficult balancing act for them to do, because that will be the result of it.
It's going to be a risk.
Yeah.
Alice Stewart, Laura Barron-Lopez, thanks so much for the conversation. Appreciate it.